in the freezing pre-dawn hours of a snow-covered battlefield somewhere in the European theater, where every breath crystallized in the icy air, and the rumble of distant tanks echoed like an approaching avalanche. A lone gunner crouched behind a battered anti-tank gun that had long been considered obsolete by his comrades, a relic of a bygone war pushed aside for newer, heavier artillery, yet here he was, fingers numb from frostbite, gripping the cold steel with a strange mixture of fear and determination, because he had discovered something that no one else in the unit dared attempt, a secret elevation trick that allowed the gun to reach angles thought impossible, angles that could pierce the heaviest of panzer armor. And as the first glimmer of dawn pierced the horizon, he saw a column of German tanks advancing across the frozen plains, their treads crunching snow, engines growling, machine guns glinting. The soldiers inside unaware that this one gunner was about to rewrite the rules of anti-tank warfare. And when the first tank crested a rise, the gunner's hands shook not from cold but from adrenaline, because if his calculations were wrong, the gun would misfire or worse, shatter under the recoil, revealing him to the enemy. Yet as he adjusted the elevation, something clicked into place, an alignment he had improvised from months of studying manuals, schematics, and battlefield experience. And with a deep breath, he fired, the shell screaming through the frosty air, slamming into the front armor of the lead panzer with a metallic shriek that seemed to echo across the valley. And the tank erupted into fire and smoke, the crew inside trapped and screaming, the explosion lighting up the sky like a deadly aurora, and the other tanks screeched to a halt, commanders staring in disbelief, realizing that a gun they had mocked and dismissed moments before had become a literal tank slayer in the hands of a single determined man. And as the gunner readied another round, snow falling like ash around him, he felt a shift in the battlefield energy, a tension as thick as lead, knowing that every enemy eye was now on him. Yet he remained calm, calculating trajectory, wind, distance, and armor thickness with almost supernatural precision, and each shot after that found its mark, piercing turret after turret, leaving a trail of burning steel and chaos, until the German advance began to crumble. And as the last rays of sunlight hit the frozen plains, he realized that this was not merely luck. It was skill, innovation, and courage fused together into a deadly ballet, a dance with death that would become the stuff of legend. And the first whispers among his fellow soldiers began immediately. That gun, it's a miracle. And yet, in the heart of the gunner, there was no triumph, only the quiet understanding that the secret trick he had risked everything to discover had transformed him into a one-man force capable of altering the course of an entire armored advance, and that every tank that fell under his fire was not just destroyed, but a testament to the hidden genius lying within what the world had considered an ordinary, forgotten piece of artillery. As the smoke from the first dozen burning panzers rose into the pale morning sky, twisting in eerie, black ribbons that the cold wind shredded and scattered across the snow, the gunner did not pause to admire the chaos he had wrought. He knew that the Germans would regroup, that they would adapt, and that the next wave of tanks would be smarter, faster, and deadlier. And so he began to move his gun into a new position, dragging the heavy artillery across frozen ground, every muscle straining, teeth clenched against the icy sting, while simultaneously scanning for enemy infantry that would inevitably attempt to flank and neutralize him. Because in this theater of war, nothing was as simple as it seemed, and every movement had to be calculated with precision, timing, and ruthless efficiency. The secret elevation trick he had discovered, adjusting the breech and the recoil mechanism to allow a higher-than-expected angle without sacrificing stability, was no longer just a hidden advantage. It was now the cornerstone of his entire strategy, and with each shot fired, he refined it further, testing distances, angles, and wind currents while under constant threat from enemy artillery, machine guns, and aerial reconnaissance. Because the Germans had quickly realized that a single gunner was decimating their armored advance, and they were determined to find, identify, and destroy him, sending infantry squads into the snowy hills to flush him out. while tanks repositioned in formations, designed to cover every conceivable approach. But he anticipated them, reading the terrain as if it were a living map, calculating choke points, snowdrifts, natural depressions in the ground, fallen trees, and the curvature of the ridges to ensure that he could fire repeatedly while remaining unseen, a ghost behind his own artillery piece. And when the first squad emerged from cover, he didn't hesitate, adjusting elevation, tracking each target, leading with precision, and one by one, enemy soldiers fell before they could even comprehend that death was approaching in the form of a single gunner, wielding a forgotten weapon. Hours bled into each other as he continued this relentless assault, firing shell after shell, each impact accompanied by the violent, screaming roar of metal giving way, explosions that tore through the frozen silence of the battlefield. And through it all, he maintained focus, not allowing shock, fatigue, or fear to cloud his judgment, because he knew that even the slightest miscalculation could mean his own destruction. By midday, he had completely altered the dynamics of the engagement. Tanks that had seemed invincible moments before now stalled, destroyed vehicles, littered the snow, enemy morale plummeted, and German commanders struggled to comprehend how a lone gunner with a supposedly outdated piece of artillery could dominate their advance so completely. Every time he fired, he adapted, observing the trajectory, impact point, and enemy reaction, continually refining the secret elevation trick, transforming the artillery into a weapon capable of reaching targets at angles previously thought impossible, turning the battlefield into a deadly chessboard where he moved first, and the enemy reacted, often too late to survive. And yet, even as victory became increasingly plausible, he knew that the greatest challenge was still ahead. The German forces would soon attempt a coordinated counterattack, bringing in their heaviest tanks and specialists trained to neutralize long-range artillery, and he would have to rely on every ounce of skill, every fraction of intuition, and every innovation he had improvised to survive and continue his astonishing streak. Because in this frozen hellscape, survival was never guaranteed. And the gunner understood that each passing moment was a high-stakes gamble in which one wrong calculation could mean instant death. Yet he remained unwavering, fully aware that his single-handed mastery of the secret elevation trick had now transformed him from a simple soldier into a tactical phenomenon, a one-man army whose cunning, precision, and audacity would echo long after the snow had melted from the battlefield, and the world began to understand the true power hidden within what was once considered an obsolete weapon. By the late afternoon, the battlefield had transformed into a frozen graveyard, with scorched panzers smoking against the snow, steel twisted from repeated impacts, and the terrified cries of enemy soldiers echoing across ridges as they scrambled to regroup. Yet the gunner remained a silent, immovable force behind his artillery, exploiting every advantage his secret elevation trick afforded him, angles no one thought possible. Arcs that sent shells diving directly onto lightly armored roofs or into otherwise unreachable weak points, and every tank that approached felt the invisible hand of death before even a single machine gun round could threaten him, while scouts and infantry attempting to flank him were shredded by precise targeting, obstacles, and improvised traps he set using his intimate knowledge of the terrain. Snowdrifts became barriers and camouflage, fallen trees became natural barricades, and frozen streams became invisible moats that slowed advancing tanks, all meticulously calculated by the gunner who understood the geometry of battle in ways his opponents could not even begin to imagine. As the enemy advanced in tighter formations, desperate to overwhelm his position, he adjusted, elevating and depressing the gun, sometimes firing low to disable tracks, sometimes sending shells arcing impossibly high to strike turret tops, each impact a symphony of destruction, crushing steel and screaming engines echoing across the frozen valley, and every explosion sent plumes of snow and debris into the sky like a deadly fireworks display, shocking the advancing German crews into hesitation. By now, the gunner had become more than a soldier. He had become a ghost, a force that seemed to anticipate every movement, reading the enemy like a book, knowing instinctively where they would concentrate, how they would maneuver, and using every tactical lesson learned from months of observation, combat, and improvisation to strike first and with deadly accuracy. As dusk approached, enemy reinforcements brought in their heaviest tanks, the panzers that had been thought invincible. Yet the gunner's mastery of elevation allowed him to target their armor in ways their engineers never anticipated, striking engine compartments, crew hatches, and ammunition storage with devastating efficiency, turning the tide and forcing the German command into confusion, hesitation, and panic. Each kill was carefully measured, each shot calculated not just for destruction, but to manipulate the enemy's perception, slowing their advance and causing disorder, proving that ingenuity and skill could outmatch brute force, and that the smallest soldier, armed with creativity and determination, could command the battlefield in ways that entire regiments could not predict or counter. By nightfall, the battlefield bore witness to an unbelievable spectacle. A lone gunner with a forgotten artillery piece, using a single secret trick of elevation, had decimated what was considered an unstoppable armored column, reduced elite crews to chaos, and completely shifted the momentum of the engagement, leaving the enemy in shock. The snow stained with steel and fire, and every soldier, German or Allied, who witnessed it would later recount the event with a mix of awe and disbelief, understanding that this was no longer conventional warfare. It was a display of tactical genius, courage, and audacity at the highest level, and that the gunner's secret elevation trick had transformed him into a legend that would echo across history, a single man who had changed the rules of battle forever. As the frozen night descended upon the battlefield, the remnants of the German armored advance lay scattered across the snow, burning tanks casting flickering shadows over the broken landscape, and the lone gunner crouched behind his artillery, exhausted yet unyielding, knowing that the final moments of this engagement would define not only the outcome of this fight, but the legend that would follow him for decades, because the last wave of enemy tanks, heavier, faster, and more heavily armored than anything he had faced before, was approaching, and every movement, every calculation, every decision had to be perfect, for any mistake would mean death. Yet he felt no fear, only the intense focus born of experience, improvisation, and the mastery of his secret elevation trick, a technique that had transformed a seemingly obsolete weapon into a panzer-killing marvel. As the lead tank crested the ridge, engines roaring, hatches opening, the gunner adjusted his elevation, factoring in distance, wind, armor thickness, and trajectory with almost supernatural precision, his hands steady despite the cold, his eyes scanning for weak points that even the engineers who built these machines never imagined could be exploited. And as he fired the first shell, it struck the front armor with a deafening explosion that hurled the tank into flames, the crew trapped inside screaming. And every subsequent shell found its mark, striking tracks, turret tops, and ammunition stores with surgical accuracy, sending panzers spiraling into snowdrifts, detonating in fireballs, collapsing metal and smoke that choked the night air, while the remaining crews watched in disbelief as their once feared armored column was systematically annihilated by a single gunner wielding a forgotten weapon turned into an instrument of death. And just when the final tank attempted a desperate flank maneuver, he executed a daring adjustment to his elevation, firing a shot that arced impossibly over debris and destroyed the tank's weak point, causing it to spin out of control and crash into its comrades, a chain reaction that left the battlefield littered with twisted steel and shattered morale, the enemy soldiers surrendering, fleeing, or hiding in snow-covered craters, unable to comprehend the magnitude of what had just occurred. And in that moment, the gunner understood the true power of his innovation. It was not the weapon alone, nor the training, but the combination of skill, courage, and creative thinking that had allowed one man to overcome overwhelming odds, to turn the tide of battle, and to etch his name into history. As he rose from his position, exhausted, hands trembling from adrenaline and cold, yet triumphant, the first rays of dawn touched the battlefield, illuminating the frozen devastation and the countless lives saved by his audacity. And a whisper spread among both Allied and enemy troops that this gunner, this solitary figure, had achieved what armies could not, transforming a single secret elevation trick into a legacy that would be remembered forever, a chilling reminder that in war, ingenuity and bravery could triumph over even the most formidable forces, and that a single man, armed with vision and determination, could leave a mark on history more profound than any general, any regiment, or any weapon ever conceived. But as he looked across the snow, a shadow stirred in the distance, a faint reminder that even legends are never truly safe, and that the world would always hold new challenges, new enemies, and new battles for those daring enough to wield genius and courage in the face of death. His story ending not with the last shot fired, but with the eternal question: who else could rise to the challenge and wield a forbidden trick to change the course of history? In the frozen expanse of the European battlefield, one lone gunner crouched behind a weathered, forgotten artillery piece, his breath crystallizing in the icy air, knowing that what he was about to attempt could either make him a legend or leave him dead. Using a secret elevation trick no one else had ever dared to try, he aimed at approaching German tanks, calculating angles, wind, and armor thickness with unmatched precision, each shot transforming his obsolete gun into a deadly panzer slayer. The first shell screamed through the sky, striking the lead tank's weak spot, erupting it into a fiery inferno that froze the enemy in disbelief. With every successive shot, he dismantled columns of armored vehicles, each explosion throwing plumes of snow and twisted metal into the air, the battlefield turning into a surreal nightmare of destruction. Enemy crews scrambled in panic, soldiers froze in shock, and commanders tried to regroup, only to realize that a single man had defied everything they had believed about artillery. Using terrain, snowdrifts, and fallen trees to his advantage, the gunner remained almost invisible, moving with calculated precision, striking targets from impossible angles, his secret trick rewriting the rules of engagement. Tanks that were supposed to be unstoppable fell under his fire, their crews trapped, screaming, as explosions lit the icy valley with deadly brilliance. Hours of relentless combat passed, yet he adapted continuously, refining his technique with each shot, manipulating enemy movements and forcing mistakes. By dusk, he had transformed a desperate defensive stand into a total rout, his forgotten weapon becoming a symbol of ingenuity and courage. Exhausted, cold, and covered in soot, he rose from the battlefield as the first rays of dawn illuminated the frozen chaos, the enemy shattered and his fellow soldiers awestruck. Each destroyed tank, each fallen enemy, was a testament to his focus, skill, and audacity. He had proven that intellect and innovation could triumph over brute force. The secret elevation trick had turned one man into an unstoppable force, capable of changing the tide of battle alone. Even as he walked away from the battlefield, the shadow of new threats loomed, a chilling reminder that genius always faces new challenges. His story would echo far beyond that frozen day, a legend of courage, precision, and deadly creativity. The snow, fire, and smoke became silent witnesses to his unparalleled feat. Soldiers on both sides would recount the tale in disbelief, the name of the gunner whispered like a ghost in the wind. The battlefield bore his mark, proof that one individual's innovation could outmatch entire armies. His legacy was not only survival but mastery, ingenuity, and the audacity to turn the impossible into reality. The enemy's fear, the Allies' awe, and the echoes of burning panzers ensured that this secret trick would never be forgotten. And in that quiet aftermath, the world saw the truth. Ordinary weapons in the hands of extraordinary men can create legends.